Hi everyone, and welcome to a Squirrel Pie Productions vlog. My name is Tommy, and today is a beautiful, sunny, and warm Friday in early January here on the Northern California coast where I'm coming to you from. Today's episode is a little bit different than my normal episodes. It's a vlog, and it's going to be a Q&A vlog. So I put it out there that I was going to do this video, and I got some great questions from some lovely people. Thank you so much to those of you who submitted questions. I intend to do all of them, and I'm hoping I didn't miss any. There were a couple videos that I asked for questions, and then also on Instagram I put it out there. So I wrote down all the questions and kind of combined the ones that I got multiple requests for, and I didn't write down anybody's name, so I apologize for that. But if you did ask me a question, just know that I say thank you to you. Okay, so just a teeny bit of random information. I guess I already said it. My name's Tommy. I live in Northern California. And I'm a knitter and an occasional sewist and crocheter, and those are pretty much the only like making things I participate in. No, that's a total lie. I also cross stitch sometimes, and I'm pretty sure there's some other stuff that I do. I don't remember, it doesn't matter. Anyway. I'm also into a bunch of other stuff, and some of that is going to come out in the questions that I'm going to answer. So let's get started with the first question. The first one that I have written down asks me, this is a food one, and if you've ever watched any of my vlogs, you probably know that food is a big part of my life. I'm really big into cooking and eating, and I just love food with an intense passion. I have a lot of respect for food and for cuisines in general, so anyway, what's my favorite potato recipe? And that's a great question. I love it because potatoes are one of my very favorite ingredients. It's one of my favorite whole foods. I love potatoes so much. I could eat almost all potato dishes constantly. There are some potato dishes that I don't like, but there aren't many. I think, and I haven't really thought about the answers to any of these beforehand, so hopefully you don't get just a lot of me going, I don't know. Anyway, I think I gotta say, this is a super basic answer, but my favorite potato dish I think is mashed potatoes. Man, I love mashed potatoes. I love them a lot. I love them. I like making mashed potatoes with mostly russet potatoes, and every once in a while, a Yukon Gold or a red potato thrown in. I like the mixture, but I like it to be mostly russets. I peel them. I am not somebody who likes skin in their mashed potatoes. No, thank you. And I mean, it's a basic way that I make mashed potatoes. I cut them up after peeling them, rinse them, simmer them in salted water, and then after I drain them, I put them back in the pot, turn the heat on low, mash them up, dry them out a little, and then mix in some cream, milk, and butter that I've warmed up. Sometimes if I'm feeling frisky, I'll add sour cream, salt and pepper, and that's it. And I adore mashed potatoes. I think they're just a beautiful food, and I can eat a lot of mashed potatoes. Usually I'll make mashed potatoes with on the side, and my plate for dinner usually just ends up being mostly mashed potatoes and just a little bit of everything else. But my other favorite potato thing that's in a really heated contention for a top with mashed potatoes is French fries. I love French fries. A lot. Yeah. I love a lot of potato things. Hash browns? Anyway, okay, I'm moving on from potatoes. I love potatoes. Thank you for that question. It was awesome. Do I have a name for my baby yet? No, I'm 19 weeks. I have trouble with pregnancy math. 20 weeks would mean I'm 5 months. So I'm almost 5 months pregnant. And I know that it's a boy, and I don't know what his name is going to be yet. I have a daughter whose name is Lucy, and we kind of the way we named her is we just made a list as soon as we knew she was going to be a girl. We made a list of all the girl names we liked and like tried different combinations with first and middle names. Her name is Lucy Valentine. And kind of slowly as time went by, we would like cross some off and like some would be our favorites, and they would switch around until like the very end we had like 2 or 3 favorites. And then it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of comes together at the end when we narrow it down from a list like that. So that's kind of the method we're going with our next baby. With Lucy, or like we did with Lucy, I'm probably going to do the same thing with this baby, is that I'm not really going to share the names that we're thinking of. And that is not what people in your life want to hear. I don't know, sometimes people act like they don't understand why you won't just tell them what you're going to name your baby. And I don't know. I am a pretty secretive person. Like, I tend to play my cards close, and I like having, I wouldn't say I like having secrets. That's not quite it. But I'm not an oversharer, definitely. And so I don't know. I also like, I feel like with Lucy, like once we got down to our final couple names, I didn't really desire the feedback from other people. And you tell people what you're thinking of naming a kid, and they, more often than not are like, that's awesome. That sounds really good. But a lot of times too, they give you their opinion, and honestly, I kind of don't want it, that kind of thing. But I can say now that I am totally lost with boys' names. With girls' names, I had so many girls' names that I loved and that I just thought were like so beautiful and just so like, I just like felt connected to like a lot of girls' names. But boys' names, I got nothing. I don't know. We've started a list and I'm not like in love with any of them. With girls' names, it was like we had a list and I had to pick from all these ones that I loved a lot. And with boys' names, I'm like, guess? So I don't know. That's where I'm at with boys' names, is we started a list. I'm not in love with any of them, but as time goes by, I kind of just keep my awareness out in the world of other people's names around me and that I run into and that I see. I look in credits a lot when I watch movies and TV shows and stuff. I look in the credits for names. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not in love with any boys' names, but I want to be. I'm going to find one. I am open to suggestions. If there's a boy's name that's like your favorite boy's name and you love it, tell me about it. I'm open to add it to my list if I like it. And you probably won't know what I pick until after he's born, so. Am I planning any baby knits? Yes, pretty much. I am gonna make a spiral blanket of awesome, which I've made one for Lucy and she still uses it. It's like her stroller blanket, pretty much. I've made a couple for friends. I love the spiral blanket of awesome. It's super fun to knit. It's a great stash buster, and it's a great like scrap user. It's just such a versatile, fun pattern. And I've picked some yarn in my stash that I'm gonna use for it, and it's this. So this is Malabrigo Rios, which is the worsted weight in the Aguas colorway. And I've had 3 skeins of this yarn in my stash for a really long time. And I decided this would be the perfect use for it. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make him a spiral blanket of awesome in that yarn. Hopefully I'm gonna cast that on soon. And as for other knits, I don't really know. I'm gonna definitely reuse a lot of the baby knits that I knit for Lucy when she was a baby, but really honestly, she didn't wear that much knitwear when she was a baby. I don't know. I found that with having she was my first experience being around a baby. I don't have experience with babies other than my own. So I found with like existing with a baby and caring for her that what worked best for me and for her were really, really practical garments. I never dressed her in anything fancy or like cutesy without having function. So honestly, hand knits for me for a baby and newborn just didn't work. I don't know. She didn't wear that many hand knits in the beginning. So she, I mean, like she lived in onesies for her first year. So I don't know that I'm gonna knit that much more for him. I might, I'm actually thinking about knitting this baby bear baklava pattern by Pernille Larsen. And it's something that I saw recently on the Fiber Tales podcast. Lerka had knit one for each of her kids and it was super cute. It's got little ears, it's a little hat with a little face hole. And so I'm thinking about knitting one of those for Lucy and for him. But other than that, I'm not sure. If anything like grabs my attention or like I feel like I really want to make it, then I will, but that's my only plan so far is the blanket and maybe the baklava. I mean, balaclava. I am so dumb. Babies can't wear baklava. You eat baklava and you wear balaclavas. Anyway, moving on to my next question. What are my favorite knitting techniques or stitches and which ones do I avoid? So I love 3-needle bind-offs, like a whole lot. I love doing them. I love it when a pattern calls for them. I get excited to do them. I don't know why. I just love actually doing it. I like the finishing that it gives too. I really like the look of it. I think it's a really nice, just clean line as like a little seam. But I also just really love doing it. I get really happy when I do it. So 3-needle bind-offs is definitely one of my favorite techniques. I love it when a pattern calls for adding short rows in the upper back of a sweater to account for the difference of where the neckline should be in the back and in the front. That's all I can think of off the top of my head for techniques that I really like or stitches that I really like. I really like doing slip stitches, and now I'm thinking of stitches. I love the plain old knit stitch. I love yarn overs. Oh, I love brioche. I super love brioche. I don't do it a lot, but I'm doing it right now and I'm just in love with it. I don't like, I had something in mind, now I forgot it. What don't I like? I don't love doing lots and lots and lots of ribbing. I don't know, boring, it's annoying, switching your hand motions. I've discovered that I don't like doing super tight gauge on small gauge, tight gauge colorwork, stranded colorwork knitting. For example, I have a pair of colorwork socks on my needles that I've tried to revisit a couple times and I just can't finish because I don't like doing it. I love doing colorwork, but doing a really tight gauge like that, it's on like size 0 needles and it's a fingering weight yarn, stranded colorwork. It's not fun. I don't like it, which is a bummer because I really want the socks, but oh well. I'm absolutely positive that there's like a ton more things that I don't like doing, but I can't. Oh, seaming. I'll seam some underarms, but I'm not going to do a seam sweater. I'm just not gonna. I've done it before. I've had the experience. I know I can do it, but I'm literally never going to choose a fully seamed garment to make. Even if I really like it, I see that it's seamed and I'm like, move it on. Just not into it, not interested. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that for now because I can't think of anything else. But if I do, I will have put it here because I got opinions. I just don't always remember. Future cast-on plans, immediate future, this baby blanket. I really also want to make that balaclava. I also really want to recast on my oxbow cardigan, which is a bulky weight cardigan by Andrea Mowry that I recently started but messed up. So I still have to rip it back and recast it on, but I really want to make sure that happens soon. I've also talked about this before, the budding sweater by somebody whose name I will put on the screen. I bought yarn for it from Elsa Wool, which is really beautiful woolen spun cormo, and it's a beautiful colorwork cardigan, and it was meant to be my next cast on a couple cast ons ago, and I still haven't done it, but that's seriously coming up really soon. I also recently discovered the Clatilda Cardigan by Pernille Larsen, who also designed the balaclava. It's like a super bulky cardigan sweater. And I think it's super cool and I really want to make it. I also recently fell in love with a couple colorwork cowls. I discovered the Moonweight cowl by Andrea Mowry and the Lundy, that's coming up though. And the Spice Blend cowl by Lindsay Fowler. They're both colorwork cowls and I'm really into them. My next garment after the budding, this isn't gonna jump cue. It's not, but it might, who knows. I fell in love with this when I saw it on Ravelry. It's called the Lundy by Camille Descoteaux. And it's a brioche open fronted cardigan. I'm just in love with it and I want to make it so bad. I'm like running through my mind right now of what yarns I want to use, what kind of colors I want to do. It's a 2-color brioche cardigan, so you can really play with a lot of color with like that. And I'm very excited about that one. It's in my queue in Ravelry and I want to make it. So those are my plans. Favorite animated movie? I love this question too. I am a huge film person. I love it like a lot. And I'm a huge cartoon person. I love animation like so hard. And there's a lot of animated movies that I really love. Off the top of my head, I feel like it's cliche. I feel like this is going to be a lot of people's answer, but Spirited Away is one of the best animated movies like ever, in my opinion. It's a Miyazaki movie, who was one of the great animated movie makers of all time. It's a Japanese movie. It's in Japanese. You can find it with English overdubbing, but I recommend watching the Japanese language version if you can and using subtitles. It's very popular, so I'm sure many of you have seen it. But if you haven't, it's such a cool story about a family in Japan moving to a new place. They're driving there, their car breaks down. Their daughter, who's very young, is really upset and in a bad place because they're moving. And she wanders off into the forest and finds this spirit spa. Like, she finds an abandoned village pretty much, and it turns out it's a spa for spirits. And it's about all of the stuff that she goes through when she's there. And it's a really magical movie. It's a really beautiful movie. It incorporates a lot of different mythologies, not just Japanese mythology, but other mythologies too. It's beautifully drawn. It's a gorgeous movie, and it's a magical movie, and it's the best. It's like the best. So I definitely recommend watching that. If you've never seen it, or if you have, watch it again. I might watch it this week now. I think I might watch it this week now that I'm thinking about it. It's so good. I never watched it when I was a kid. It's kind of, I mean, it's about a little girl. It's not exactly a kid's movie though. Like, I think my husband watched it when he was a kid. I didn't though. I discovered it after I met him as an adult. And it's a movie everybody can enjoy. I don't know. Little kids, I'm sure, would find it a little scary, but it's amazing. It's a great movie. Another animated movie that I have been thinking about ever since I saw it, which was years ago, and I've only ever seen it once, and I didn't really know much about the filmmaker, whose name is Tom Moore, who's an Irish filmmaker. I'm not sure if he just does animation, but he did like The Secret of the Kells, which I've also seen, but the movie that I'm talking about that he did that I loved so much that I still think about it years later is called The Song of the Sea, and it's about I think I remember much less about, I've seen Spirited Away probably a dozen times, and I've seen this movie once. But this one's about, it's a family, I think it's a son and a daughter and a dad, and they live like on a lighthouse or something like in serious isolation at the sea. And their mom dies. I think she drowns or something like that. And it's kind of about them growing up in isolation with their like heartbroken father. It ends up being about selkies, which are, I don't know much about selkies, so I might get this wrong, but they're a mythical creature that are like, I don't know if they're like half seal? Is it seals that selkies are? Half seal, half woman, something like that. It's also a movie that's really magical. It has to do with mythology, and mythical creatures, stuff like that, spirits. I'm really drawn to stuff like that, kind of old folktale kind of beings. And it's a really great movie. This one's really, they're both kind of like family oriented and like touching and kind of moving. This one to me was really moving. The whole story, the loss of the mother, and how that mother's like legacy is represented in this magical being. It was a really moving movie to me, and it's really good. It's really, really good. So I loved that one. I'm thinking about Disney movies now because I do love a good classic Disney film. I don't love CGI, so kind of where Disney has gone with their animated movies. They don't even make that many of them anymore. I don't love. But as far as the classics go, Little Mermaid was like my favorite growing up. I also really loved The Lion King and Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. Love those. The Princess and the Frog was a really great thing that they did not too long ago. And it was their kind of return to hand-drawn animation, which was like, you know, made me super happy. So yeah. I love me some animated movies. Where did Squirrel's name come from? My cat is named Squirrel Cat. And why is my podcast called Squirrel Pie Productions? So her full name is Valoria the Squirrel Cat. Valoria is from a Pixies song, and they're a band that I love and I used to love even more. And so let me tell you the story of Squirrel, and then I'll tell you about Squirrel. She was a stray. She showed up in the alley behind my husband's house back when he was my boyfriend. I was 21 and he was 18 probably, and he lived with his parents, and I lived in my own apartment. And this kitten showed up in his alleyway, and his family took in a lot of strays. They were definitely a cat family. They always had 1 or 2 cats. And they only ever got their cats because they showed up as strays. And it was at the point kind of like they already had like 2 cats or something, and his dad was just like, we are not taking this cat. Like, put his foot down. I'm not taking another stray cat right now. So the cat still, she kept coming around, and you know, everybody's nice to her. I would go over to his house and like, you know, everybody would pet her and stuff. And when I found out that they weren't going to take her in, I was like, well, obviously I'm going to take her. So I had met her like twice, and she was super friendly and really like she needed a home. You know, she was really young and she was hungry. And I had already had a cat. He was a cat that I had had since I was in high school. His name was Sancho. He lived for a very long time. And I had him at that point living with me in my apartment. And so me and Colin and like 2 of our friends that happened to be with us coaxed Squirrel into my car. I didn't have a cat carrier or anything. And we drove her to my apartment. And she was a teeny, 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 tiny little kitten. And she had a huge fluffy tail. And I thought she looked like a squirrel, so I named her Squirrel. That's the story with why she's named Squirrel. And it's funny because if you see her now, she's much older. I think she's like 16 or 17 years old. She's very scrawny, and her tail is super ratty. So she does not look like a squirrel anymore. But yeah, she looked like a squirrel. And I thought I was being funny and clever by naming her something like a different animal. And so I had Squirrel and Sancho. And then after that, another kitten showed up in my laundry room of that apartment. And I took him in, and he ended up being named Annalie from the Beach Boys song, Annalie the Healer. And everybody else called him Mr. Pants. Don't know why. So his name ended up being Mr. Pants because nobody would call him Annalie. And he ended up going to live with a friend of mine when I moved away. And he was an amazing cat. Squirrel obviously still lives with me. Sancho lived with me up until when he died, which was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I named this podcast Squirrel Pie Productions because before I had the podcast, I was like, if I had like a knitting podcast, you know, I went through this thing that maybe some of you go through, or I'm sure a lot of podcasters went through before they actually started, where it's like, what if I had a podcast? Like, what would it be like? What would I call it? What would I talk about? How would it go? Am I going to practice? Should I just sit here in front of a wall and practice a podcast? And so I was at that point, and I was trying to think of a bunch of different names that it could potentially be. And I don't consider myself somebody that comes up with names very easily. It's kind of hard for me. I don't think I'm that clever. And I don't know, Squirrel Pie Productions, like, somehow came into my mind. I thought it sounded cool, and so it stuck. I don't love it anymore, honestly. I would love to change the name of my podcast. I don't know, I just kind of don't really identify with it anymore. I don't love the sound of it. And there's no good reason. I think I've just grown out of it, maybe. But I don't know what I would change it to. Something with Moonstone, because that's my business name. I don't know, though. I've never been able to, like, come up with a good Moonstone-related name, either. Like, Moonstone Knitting, but, like, it's not, like, 100% a knitting channel. I don't know. I have no idea. But, yes, that answers that. What inspires you in your creative life? Really, I would say the biggest thing that inspires me in what I make is other podcasts. I have a podcast because I love watching podcasts. It's the only thing I watch when I'm alone. Like, I love TV and movies, but I don't watch TV and movies when I'm alone. I only watch them with Colin. And so when I'm watching things, and when I'm by myself, I watch knitting podcasts. I love it. I just love it. I watch a lot of them. I love all of you podcasters that I watch. I'm a fangirl to all of you. And everything that other people make inspires me. When I see somebody else making something that I think is cool, that's what inspires me. Seeing other people do what I want to be doing is what makes me want to do the thing. So that's the biggest inspiration, I'd say. What are my staple recipes? So I cook a lot, and I definitely have staple recipes that are in heavy rotation at my house. I try to do new things all the time to keep the variety and to, like, cook with the seasons and to kind of keep up my creativity in the kitchen, but there are definitely fallbacks. Obviously, pizza is one of them. I talk about pizza a lot here. I do have I have like a recipe book that I've made for myself, just like of me writing down like the stuff that I make all the time, that either I've just always made that way or that I've taken from other recipes and tweaked to make it the way I like it. So I have a recipe written down for pizza dough in that book, and I think I will try to put it in the description box below in case you're interested. I'm not going to like write out a whole recipe. I'm just going to put my formula for pizza dough. But pretty much what I do is I mix together all of the ingredients for the dough. I knead it, put it in the fridge for like 3 days. And then I take it out, I shape it, I put whatever I'm gonna put on it, and then I bake it in the oven on a pizza stone at 550 convect, which my oven does, but at whatever the highest temperature your oven goes to, and if it has convect, use it. And that's how I make pizza. And a lot of people have asked me about how I make pizza because I talk about it so much on my vlogs, so that's it. I'll put the recipe below. And I do often tweak it. Sometimes I'll go to other recipes that I want to try and try different things. But that's kind of what I always come back to. Mexican food, like not like creative Mexican food, like dishes, but just like beans and rice and tortillas. All the time in my house, constantly. So I make a pot of pinto beans every week. Or at least it's more than every week, I think. It's whenever we run out, I make more. And I often make Mexican style brown rice to go with it, which is pretty much just brown rice made with tomatoes, onions, and garlic that you blend up and then add chicken stock to it to make your liquid ratio for the rice you have. And that's how I make my rice. And tortillas. So like we'll have burritos or something like all the time with like, you know, guacamole, lettuce, salsa, hot sauce, stuff like that. Pico de Gallo I make all the time too, especially in the summertime. In-season Pico de Gallo is like the best. Tempeh stir fry is a big staple in my house. Whatever vegetables we have with tempeh, sauteed, served over either rice or ramen noodles. We have it like all the time. Macaroni and cheese, like homemade baked macaroni and cheese, we have a lot too. My husband's favorite dinner is meatloaf and mashed potatoes, so that happens a lot too. Ooh, I'm really into making like a really basic, really simple Thai green curry dish where I just like buy the green curry paste that you can get at the store, like in a little jar. And I will saute whatever vegetables I have or want. I'll do chicken and the curry paste with coconut milk, let it simmer for a little while and serve that over rice. I love that. We have that a lot too. And it's super easy. Yeah, that's what I can think of off the top of my head, but I think those are some of our staples. They're not all of them for sure. Do you make bread on a regular basis, and how do you store it to keep the crust nice and crusty? So I do make bread semi-regularly. I go in and out of phases with bread making. So I will make bread about once a week when I'm on top of it. And when I'm not on top of it, I'll go like, you know, a month or two without making it and then kind of go in bursts of making it again. I've experimented a lot with bread baking. I've made a lot of different kinds of bread. There was a time in my life before knitting when like bread baking was like a huge hobby of mine. But kind of where I've fallen on bread baking that I do regularly is either a whole wheat sandwich bread or a multigrain sandwich bread. Both recipes I use the Peter Reinhardt whole grains book version. Yeah, he's got a whole grains book. It's really, really good. And those are the recipes that I use for either whole wheat sandwich bread or multigrain bread. And I love them. I love making that bread. It's so good. And then the other style of bread that I make is like a typical like baguette style or French bread style. Sometimes I'll do like a ciabatta, something like that. For those, the recipes that I use are straight out of a book called Bread by Jeffrey Hamelman, I think is his name. And so those are recipes I can't share because they're in those books, but if you are into bread, those are the only two bread books that I recommend. There are a lot of really good ones, but those are the really basic ones that have everything that you're gonna need in them. And I've had a lot of bread books and I've gotten rid of them all except for like those two. They're the best. One's for whole grain breads, one's for everything else. They're awesome. They're probably pretty popular in libraries if you want to check them out. You can probably get recipes from them off the internet, honestly. But yeah, that's what I use for all my other kinds of bread. In terms of storage, in an ideal world, I would store them in a paper bag inside a plastic bag. That's how I like to store bread to keep it freshest longest. But I don't use new bags for storing bread. I always keep like produce bags or brown paper bags that I get randomly in my kitchen, and then I use those for storing bread. Sometimes I don't have those things, like good tip for saving plastic bags for when you need plastic bags for something and you don't want to use like a brand new resealable Ziploc bag, is tortilla bags. The big bags that flour tortillas come in, they usually zip close. I save all of those. So like if I'm out of everything, then I'll just throw it in one of those. But typically I have either plastic or paper, and typically I'll just use one to store my bread in, whatever I have. But ideally I would use both. Have I ever suffered from a repetitive strain injury from making, and how did I manage it? I have suffered from a couple different minor injuries. I don't know if they're from knitting or not. One of them I know wasn't, but they've definitely affected my knitting. So the first injury that I ever really had of that nature was I messed up my right shoulder this one time when I went to Costa Rica with my husband. I wanted desperately to try riding a horse. So I mostly decided it was my idea to go with one of these companies that you can sign up for it, you and a group of people, give all your packs and everything to somebody who drives your stuff from one town to the next. You get on a horse in one town, you ride that horse to the next town, and then you get your stuff and you leave. I thought that would be the coolest way to experience riding a horse for the first time, and it wasn't. It was so hard. I had never gotten on a horse before. It was a really bad idea. It was and there was no instruction. Like the guides, they weren't like teaching us how to ride a horse. They were just like, get on your horse, let's go. And it was very difficult, hard on my body. I didn't know, like, I constantly felt like I was gonna fall off. So I was like really strained. I was like holding the reins, like my body was super tight, and like, you know, you're constantly jerking around. And so I messed up my shoulder doing that. I don't know exactly how, but right after that, it was just like very bad. And I think it was the constant like jerking with my muscles being so tense at the same time for like 4 hours. Horrible. I haven't been on a horse since. But so that took a long time to heal. It healed very slowly, and it still flares up every once in a while. If I like do something to, like, if my arm hangs like away from my socket in the wrong way, like with weight, if I'm like carrying a lot of weight in my hand and I'm just like treating it like it's dead weight and it's hanging, it'll mess up my shoulder. So every once in a while that flares up and it really messes with me while I'm knitting. So with that, I always just prop up my elbow on a pillow and knit that way and just baby it until it feels better again. But there are two other things that I think have a more direct relationship with knitting than that did. Every once in a while, my fingers start to feel really bad. And it's like the joints. It'll be like my index finger and I think my middle finger too. They'll just start hurting. And I think it's from knitting, because when I knit, I'll show you. The way that I knit is like this. So when I have my needle, I wrap my yarn around, right? And then when I pull the yarn through that loop, I don't just go like that. Oh no, it's this hand. I push it through with that finger. I always push it through. And so I think it's on this hand that it happens sometimes. Something about that repetitive motion messes with like this joint, and it'll just start feeling really sore and painful for a while, every once in a while. And whenever that happens, the only thing that I do is I stop that motion of pushing the needle through with my finger, and I just make myself knit differently. And it's not as comfortable, but it just stops the strain on that part of my body until it feels better, and then I'll go back to doing it and it's fine for another few years. Another thing that I've dealt with just in the past couple of years is wrist pain. So I don't know exactly how to describe it. It's just like a generic wrist pain. And I know it's from knitting, and crochet does it too a lot. So when that happens, I still like knit through it, but I will knit in such a way where I'll like move my whole arm or something like that. I also wear a wrist brace when that happens. So this is the wrist brace that I use, and I just found this on Amazon, and it's like hand specific. So I have one for each hand. And it feels, oops, this one's for this hand. Maybe it's, I get my hands confused. Which ones are hurt when they're not actually hurt. I don't know what it is. But this one fits like this. And the nice thing about this wrist brace is that it's really stiff. Like you can't move your wrist in this. And Colin has wrist issues too, so we both wear these. And so whenever our wrists flare up, we wear these whenever we're doing something that is gonna make us move our wrists around too much. And so I'll wear this while I'm knitting, or like, you know, stacking wood or something. And sometimes I'll wear it even when I'm feeling fine, just to make sure nothing happens. Not while knitting, but while doing more vigorous things. But definitely when it's hurting, I'll wear this while I'm knitting. And it still allows me to knit, it's just a different movement. What is bringing you joy in your life at the moment? I mean, so I guess like real answer is my family. Lucy is now, she's almost 2.5, and she's just the cutest freaking thing in the entire world. And she makes me really happy, and she's just adorable. And every time she like does something or like leaves the room, I'm just like I can't help but like say out loud, like, she's freaking cute. She makes me really happy right now. She's just like turning into this like little kid that has language and has curiosity, and she's really interested in so many things, and she's interested in learning about things, and she picks up on things really fast, and she's just really a joyous person, and it rubs off. So she's kind of the top thing in my life right now that's bringing me joy. My husband Colin too, me and him get along like really, really great. We were friends before we were a couple, and we have a lot of things in common. We talk constantly about all kinds of stuff, and he has switched to working from home since the pandemic started. So we've been spending a lot more time together than we did for a while when he was working full time and had like a total of like an hour commute every day. And it's just been really nice having us all in the same house so often. It's been kind of great in that regard. So having them around a lot is really bringing me a lot of joy. And in the more like selfish, materialistic vein of what's bringing me joy, like as always, knitting brings me a lot of joy. I tend to only work on projects that I'm really in love with, and that's no exception right now. I'm also rediscovering cookbooks right now, which is bringing me a lot of joy. I've had in the past a massive, not only cookbook collection, but book collection. And I have gotten to this place in my life where I don't like having things around that I'm not actively using. So I have dwindled down my book collection considerably, which includes a lot of cookbooks. And slowly over time, I've kind of amassed it down to a small set of cookbooks. I have one shelf full of I have 2 shelves of cookbooks, like that big. And those are all the cookbooks I have right now. And I've had the same cookbooks for a very long time, and I've dwindled it down to like my basic, most important cookbooks. On one shelf are the ones that I use all the time, and those are like really the ones. And then on the other shelf are just books that I think are so good I couldn't get rid of, but I've realized lately that I don't use them. A lot of them are really like basic, broad topic cookbooks that teach basics, and I don't need that anymore, so I never use them. I never use them for recipes or inspiration or anything. So I've decided recently that I want to start trading them out for cookbooks that I actually might want to use more often. So I have slowly started buying more and newer and interesting and inspiring looking cookbooks. And each time I bring one in, I push one of those old ones out and I donate it. So my new cookbooks have been really inspiring me right now. Particularly the 2 that I'm cooking from this week are Ottolenghi's Simple, which is so good. I only kind of recently discovered Ottolenghi. I've known his name's Yodam Ottolenghi, and he's a restaurateur, I think, in England. And his food is mostly like Middle Eastern food. And I've seen his name for a long time, but only recently started like delving into his cooking style and his recipes, and I've kind of fallen in love with them. So that book's been really a big part of my life lately, making me really happy. Another one is called, I decided just to go get the books because I wanted to show you. So I'm talking about 2 of my most recent collection editions right now. So this is Ottolenghi Simple, and the recipe that I'm making right now, I just put it to marinate this morning, and I'm gonna eat it tomorrow night for dinner, is chicken Marbella. And it's a really good looking roasted chicken leg recipe with things like olives and garlic and oregano. dates, bay leaves. I mean, it's just really fragrant, really good sounding. I haven't tried it yet. And then I'm doing a rice recipe out of this too for tomorrow night's dinner. So I don't know where to put anything. The other book is called Nopalito, and it's by Gonzalo Guzman. And this is Mexican food. Nopalito is a restaurant in the Bay Area. I've never been. I'd never even heard of it, and now I really want to go. But I really wanted a Mexican cookbook for inspiration for specific dishes. I'm probably the most well-versed in Mexican food cooking because it's what I grew up with. My family is Mexican, and that's the food that I've always loved, and I learned how to cook the earliest. And I've got the basics down for Mexican food, and I make it all the time. But I wanted a book that was gonna give me ideas for different specific and maybe regional things that I wouldn't just think of on my own. I have a lot of Mexican staples that I stick with really hard, so I wanted to kind of go out of the basic box of Mexican food. And this is a really, really good looking book. Some of the recipes in here sound so good. The thing that I'm making tonight from here is called Huevos de Caja. And I think there's a picture. So that's what I'm making tonight. And it's like really simple. Like I would just make huevos rancheros with eggs on top of beans and tortillas and salsa, like a red salsa. And this is really similar, but there's tweaks. It's made with a green cilantro salsa instead of what I would normally make. So just stuff like that, like, I don't know, specific dishes that are variations on what I would just normally make, but, you know, kind of never branch out from. So I'm very excited about this book right now too. Do you ever have trouble letting go of your hand-dyed yarn? So I am the dyer behind Moonstone Dyeworks, a very small hand-dyed yarn business. And do I ever have trouble letting go of the yarn? No, because if I want it, I just dye more for myself. Sometimes I create colorways that I do on a whim and don't write down what I do and just sell it as a one-off. And sometimes I love those so much that I wish I had written it down. So it can be a little hard sometimes to part with those. I sometimes dye a colorway once, write down what I did, and then I don't label it. So for instance, this morning I was dyeing yarn, and I really wanted to dye 2 colorways that I did once in the past. And I could have sworn that I had the formulas for those written down, and I didn't in like my regular formula book. And so I went to like my other book where I just write things down as I go as I'm creating a colorway, and I couldn't figure out, I didn't label it. I didn't write down which, sometimes it'll just be like a big block of writing of what I've done, and then I don't say what colorway it ended up being. So I couldn't find it. I don't know what it is. And like stuff like that happens sometimes, and that's a little tough because I'm like, but in terms of like dyeing it, having a batch of something, putting it up in an update, it's really not hard to let it go because typically I can make more for myself if I want to. And it's such a thrill and such a rush sending the yarn that I've dyed out to people who want it. It's like, I don't know, it's like that same feeling. It's like it's that feeling of like when you have a crush on someone and they like pay attention to you. It's that like it's like kind of nervous and kind of like exciting, and it's just such a great experience and emotional rush when I sell my yarn, when I get it out to people who are going to use it, when I see the projects that other people are making with the yarn that I dye. It's thrilling, and there's saving it for myself is nothing to compare to that feeling. So no, it's pretty easy. I love getting my yarn out the door and to people who, I mean, I just hope we're gonna use it. Are you having any cravings, pregnancy cravings? I have more of a sweet tooth than I used to. I'm not someone who typically has a really strong sweet tooth, but I do right now. I've recently been around a lot of chocolate and candy. I think it was because it was Christmas and so it was just around, and I've been really into that. I discovered Godiva chocolate. I work at a dental office, and somebody, I think another office, sent us a huge box of Godiva chocolates, and I had no idea how superior Godiva chocolates are to other chocolates. It was so good. They're like truffles, you know, they're like little filled chocolates. I ate a lot of those recently. I would say chocolates. And I'm usually not that into chocolate. Like, I like chocolate fine, but it's not like a thing that I like love chocolate. But I kind of do right now. So I would say sweets and chocolate. I looked up Godiva because I was like, I'm just going to buy some for myself. That stuff is expensive. So I didn't. What is my favorite dessert? I like a lot of desserts, a lot. I love baking and making desserts. But like pre-pregnancy Tommi didn't care that much about eating them, but I do really like a lot of them. I love pie. I love fruit pies a lot. I love ice cream a lot. I've been really into, with both these pregnancies, I've really fallen in love with like certain dairy-free ice creams. I think mostly like coconut milk-based ice cream. I just really like it. It's really like, I really kind of like ice cream that isn't that creamy, that is like kind of like icy almost. And it's kind of like that. It's really good. There's also this other ice cream that I discovered that's like based on bananas. So it's just like bananas with flavoring frozen. And that's really, really good. If you can find something like that, I really like that. They're not really desserts, but I eat them as desserts. A well-made donut. There's nothing better in the universe to me than a properly made donut. Love donuts. I would say that's it. Oh, cheesecake, no. I think classically, like when I was a kid, that was like my favorite dessert, but I don't know if I care too much about cheesecake anymore. I like it, but I would way rather have a donut than cheesecake. Donuts, I'm going with donuts. Donuts. The last question is someone who's noticed that I have a lot of houseplants, and do I have a favorite? I kind of do, and I've brought her out. I'm very into houseplants. I got that from my mother, who growing up had tons of houseplants all over the house all the time. She worked at a nursery for a while, and so she's really good at taking care of houseplants and really good at like potting them artfully, if that makes sense. And she spends a lot of time taking a lot of care of her houseplants. And so I grew up around that, and I've always, ever since I moved out on my own, I love having houseplants. It's taken me a long time to get to the point where I'm kind of decent at taking care of them. I was pretty bad at it for a long time. But I've had a lot of houseplants. There's some of my houseplants that at this point I've had for a really long time, and I feel kind of attached to them, and this is one of them. So this is a wax plant. I don't know the scientific name. I don't know the scientific names for most of my houseplants, which is dumb because I went to school to be a botanist. But I love this plant so much, and pretty much I love it because of how healthy it is and how beautiful and robust it is. It's not terribly often, and like I said, it happens slowly with me when one of my houseplants becomes really healthy and really robust and starts growing really well. And this was one of my first houseplants that really became really healthy over time and maintained that health over time. And I just love it. It's really beautiful. It grows really well. It has these really nice thick leaves that are really shiny and really pretty with the two-tone color. I just love it. And I've had it for a really long time. It's moved with me through several houses or apartments or whatever. And yeah, it's one of my favorites. But that isn't to say, like, it pains me to not talk about all my houseplants while I'm talking about this one, but I'm restricted to this one. I love it. I love this plant so much. I think it's probably so healthy because it's a pretty easy plant to take care of. So if you're in the market for a houseplant, I recommend a wax plant. And look how they grow. They're so cool. They're also pretty easy to root. I have rooted this one pretty recently. So I just took a cutting off of the end of it, put the stem of that cutting into a little jar of water, left it in the window until it started developing roots. And then pretty early on, once it started developing roots, I planted it. And it's doing really, really good. I failed one time before that in rooting a piece of this plant, but I think it's because I let it sit too long in the water and the roots got a little too used to water. So the second time is going really nicely. And yeah, I'm also really into propagating and rooting plants instead of buying them at the nursery because they're expensive. Like, houseplants are expensive. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're around somebody else's plant and you are comfortable enough asking for a cutting, take a cutting home, root it in some water and plant it and see what happens. My mom also taught me to keep your eye on the ground when you're in like hardware stores or nurseries or whatever, and stuff that's fallen on the ground, that's free game. There's like a stem or a leaf or something on the ground, pick it up, put it in your pocket, go home and make it into a real plant. It's a nice free way to do it. So yeah, I love this plant. And that is it. I hope I got all the questions. Thank you for being here with me today. I know this was kind of a long vlog episode, but I had a good time and I hope you did too. And if you're still with me at this point in the video, thank you so much for being here and for watching. I appreciate it so much. If you want to stick around for the next episode, which will be next Friday in a week from today, my next proper episode, I'm going to be announcing some really exciting make-alongs. I asked for make-along suggestions in my last episode and you all came through amazingly. I want to do all the make-alongs now. You had such good ideas. So I've picked a couple that I'm going with. I'm going to announce those in the next episode. And yeah, I'm very excited. And I, as always, would love to hear from you. If you want to give me your answers to any of the questions that I answered today, please tell me in the comments below. I love hearing from you, and all of these questions that I got asked, I want to know about you too. Why did you name your cat Squirrel? Have fun and stay awesome. Bye.